This happened a few months ago. I was working late at my IT support job. The office was sleek and modern, all glass and metal. The only sound I could hear was the soft buzz of the server racks. I liked it this way. It was quiet, and I could focus on my tasks without distractions. I'd often stay after hours, fixing problems while the world outside faded away. But then, things started to feel off. One night, as I made my way to the break room for a quick coffee, I overheard whispers. They were low and muffled, but I could have sworn I heard my name. I stopped and listened, my heart racing. The break room was dark, with only the faint light from the vending machine. I peeked inside, but it was empty. I shook my head, convincing myself it was just my imagination, and went back to my desk. As weeks passed, my coworkers began to act strange. Sarah, who used to joke with me, would avoid my gaze. Instead of small talk, she hurried past me and left cryptic notes on my desk. "Don't trust them," one said, scribbled in her hurried handwriting. I felt a chill run down my spine. Jeff, another colleague, started staring blankly at his screen, not responding to anything. The atmosphere changed too. The lights flickered more often. I'd hear footsteps in the hall, but nobody would be there when I looked. I felt isolated. Some nights, I was the last one in the office, and the silence felt suffocating. One evening, I was fixing a software issue when I glanced at my screen and saw a strange message pop up. It was just a string of letters, but the font looked wrong. I turned around, thinking someone was behind me. No one was there. I decided to head out, but then I heard Jeff's voice from the back room. "It's too late for him," he said, his tone low and shaky. I swallowed hard. I'd only seen him once today, but he always looked so fearful. The final straw was a week later. It was a Friday, and I was working alone again. I wanted to finish my tasks before the weekend. Around midnight, I felt that chill again when I heard a loud bang. I shot up, looking around. I was frozen in place. The noise came from the server room. I walked towards it, my palms sweating. When I reached the door, I hesitated. It felt wrong, like something was waiting for me. I took a deep breath and pushed it open. The lights inside flickered, and I saw something dart across the room. I called out, but my voice echoed back, empty. Then the door slammed behind me. I turned and saw Sarah standing there, her eyes dark. "You shouldn't have come here," she whispered. I tried to move, but I couldn't. I still don't know what happened after that. I remember waking up in the lobby, and the front doors were unlocked. I stumbled outside into the night, feeling the cool air hit my face like a slap. You'd think I'd quit, but I didn't. I still work there. But every time I go back at night, I hear those whispers again. And I can't shake the feeling that something is still lurking in the shadows of that office. The next week, I found myself back in the office after another long day. I knew the whispers would be waiting for me, but I couldn't shake the sense that I needed to confront whatever was happening. The low hum of the servers felt like a warning. It unnerved me, but I pushed through it, trying to focus on my tasks. As the clock struck 11, I gathered my things and prepared to wrap up. But as I rose, I caught movement out of the corner of my eye. It was Jeff, standing at the end of the hallway, his head tilted slightly as if he were listening to something I couldn't hear. He didn't even look up when I said his name. "Jeff?" I called, unsure if he could even hear me over the drone of the machines. He turned his head slowly, his gaze vacant. "You need to leave," he rasped, his voice low. My heart raced. "They're watching you." He blinked, then stepped back into the shadows, disappearing. I was left staring at where he'd been, my pulse pounding in my ears. I didn't even want to know what he meant by "they." All I could focus on was the gnawing anxiety building in my gut. I headed to the break room, hoping to find comfort in some coffee. As I pushed through the door, I froze. Something about the room felt wrong, like a heavy blanket had been thrown over it. I glanced around. The chairs were in disarray, and the lights flickered erratically. Then, against the far wall, I saw a familiar figure. Sarah was standing there, but this time, she was facing away from me, her hair covering her shoulders. "Sarah?" I stepped closer. "Are you okay?" Without turning, she whispered, "It's too late." The same words echoed in my head, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Just then, I heard a loud crash behind me. I whipped around, but nothing was there. When I turned back, she was gone. Why am I still here? I thought as panic surged through me. I stumbled back into the hallway. My breath was hot and shallow. The fear was getting thicker, wrapping around me. I needed answers, but how could I find them? I was losing my grip. I decided to confront Jeff. I marched back to his desk, the anger boiling inside me. When I got there, he was gone. Every piece of paper was neatly stacked, but his computer screen was eerily blank. It was as if he had vanished from existence. I fumbled with my phone, thinking I'd call him, but I hesitated. Instead, I opened my email and started to type a message, but stopped. The subject line read, "Don't trust them." Suddenly the lights went out. I was plunged into darkness. My heart raced as I fumbled for my phone, using its light to guide me. "No, no, no," I whispered to myself. The shadows seemed deeper, stretching around me like claws. And then, I heard it again. The whispers, almost closer this time. I turned toward the sound, ready to confront whatever was lurking in the dark. But just as I did, a figure stepped into my light. It was Sarah again. "You shouldn't be here," she exclaimed, her voice blending with the echoes. "You need to run." My mind raced as I realized I had no idea where to go. But this time, I felt compelled to follow her words. I turned to leave, only to find another figure blocking my path. Maybe it wasn't just a benign warning. Someone or something was hunting me. My heart dropped. I had to escape. But would I make it out this time? I lunged to the side, heart hammering, trying to squeeze past the figure blocking my way. But they stepped forward, and I found myself face to face with a stranger. He wore a blank expression and moved with an unusual calmness, unlike anyone I had encountered at work. "You should listen to her," he said flatly. I darted around him, but the hallway felt different. It twisted in a way I couldn't explain. No longer a corridor I knew well. It became a maze, every doorway looming like a trap. My instincts screamed at me to get out. Breathing hard, I spotted a stairwell and bolted for it. The wood creaked beneath me, sending ripples of dread through my body. I glanced back, half expecting to see the man pursuing me. But I was alone, my panic echoing in the stairwell's emptiness. As I reached the landing on the next floor, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I hesitated, then pulled it out. A message illuminated the screen. "They're coming for you. Don't trust them." The sender was unknown. I felt a knot twist tighter in my stomach. Who was watching me? I had to find a way out, or at least a safe place to gather my thoughts. The office building should be deserted at this hour, but there was something off. Something unsettling lingered in the air, a heavy silence that felt like it was pressing down on me. I chose a familiar conference room at the far end of the hall. I slipped inside and locked the door behind me. The room was dim, shadows draping over the long table. I sank into a chair, my mind racing with thoughts. Was I losing it? Was this all just stress? Suddenly the door rattled. I froze, heart leaping into my throat. "Hey, let me in!" It was Jeff's voice. Relief washed over me, but I struggled against it. Did I really trust him? I couldn't forget the fear in his eyes or his warning. "Go away!" I shouted, realizing how shaky my voice sounded. I regretted it the moment I said it. The rattling stopped, leaving an unsettling stillness. Next, I heard footsteps retreating. My breath hitched as I turned to the window. Shadows danced on the glass, moving in sync with my racing heart. I was trapped, and every instinct told me that wherever Jeff had gone, no good would come of it. Minutes passed, or maybe it was hours. I had lost all sense of time. Then I noticed a small flicker of light in the corner of the room. It pulsed gently, almost like a heartbeat. As I leaned closer, I realized it was coming from a small device on the table. I didn't recognize it. It looked like a recording device, but it was labeled surveillance. Panic surged again. Who was watching me? Why? I had to figure out what was going on. Reaching for the device, my fingers brushed against it, and suddenly, it clicked on. A voice filled the room, faint but growing steadier. "You shouldn't have done that." That voice sent chills racing down my spine. I needed to escape now. But the door behind me was my only way out, and I knew something waited on the other side. I held my breath, feeling the weight of the silence around me, as the voice faded, and an unsettling stillness filled the room. My heart pounded in my chest. It was a rhythmic reminder that I was still here, still breathing, still alive. But for how long? I glanced back at the door. It was the only way out. I couldn't stay here. I needed to know what was happening. Slowly, I stood, keeping my eyes on the door. The shadows around me seemed to stretch and curl like tendrils, creeping closer with each heartbeat. I took a deep breath and approached the exit. Every step felt heavy. Just as I reached for the doorknob, I heard a soft tapping behind me. Spinning around, I caught just a glimpse of movement, something darting away from the corner of my eye. I froze, mind racing, trying to rationalize what I had seen. Had I imagined it? Panic threatened to clutch at my throat again, but I fought against it. Gathering my resolve, I swung the door open and stepped into the hallway. My heart sank as I realized it was darker than before. The fluorescent lights flickered ominously. I peered down the corridor, and then I heard it again. The distinct sound of footsteps echoing in the distance. They were close, much closer than I wanted to admit. I had to move fast. I made my way down the hall, trying to keep quiet, but the floor creaked underfoot. The building had been transformed into a labyrinth of fear. Every door looked the same, each corner a potential hiding place for something sinister. I turned toward a window, hoping to catch a glimpse of the outside world. Freedom. But as I glanced outside, the sight sent a jolt through me. The streets were empty, devoid of life. Even the sky was a washed-out gray, as if it were holding its breath. I felt eyes on me, an unseen weight pressing against my back, urging me to turn around. Suddenly a voice broke through the silence, low and gravelly. "You can't escape." My skin prickled. I spun around, but no one was there. Just shadows darting in and out of the pale light. Was I losing my mind? Every fiber in my being screamed to run, but I was frozen in place. Then I thought of the message. "They're coming for you. Don't trust them." My mind raced through every coworker, every small interaction. I replayed their faces, searching for signs. Who could I trust? A noise came from the stairwell behind me. A thud, followed by a familiar voice. "Hey, are you there?" It was Jeff again. "Go away!" I shouted, desperation creeping into my voice. What was happening? Why couldn't anyone just leave me alone? The footsteps grew louder as he approached. The tension knotted tighter in my stomach. I had to take a chance. Bolting away from the window, I moved back toward the conference room, my mind racing for a plan. I had to confront Jeff, but there was no certainty he was the same man I used to know. I reached the door. My hand hovered over the knob, anticipation coiling within me. Just as I turned it, I heard Jeff's voice again. "I know you're in there. You can't hide forever." That's when I saw it. A shadow looming behind him, arms outstretched. And just like that, I knew I wasn't alone anymore. I could hardly breathe. My hand shook on the doorknob as I tried to process what I'd just seen. The shadow behind Jeff looked almost human, but my instincts screamed that it was anything but. "Jeff," I croaked, struggling to keep my voice steady. "What's behind you?" "Nothing." He didn't respond. Instead, his gaze shifted, and I followed it just in time to see the shadowy figure retreat into the darkness. Panic surged in me. I couldn't think straight. I had to know what was going on, but I also needed to protect myself. I pushed the door open wide, ready to confront whatever was in front of me. Jeff stood there, confused. "What are you talking about?" "There's nothing," but I wasn't listening. I darted past him, ready to put distance between me and whatever was lurking in the shadows. "We need to get out of here." He grabbed my arm, pulling me back. "Wait, you're not making any sense." "I'm not making sense? Did you not see it?" I nearly yelled. My heart raced. The darkness felt like it was closing in. Then, for a brief moment, the lights flickered again, and the figure stepped back into view. This time, I could see its face, a twisted caricature of someone I recognized. One of my coworkers, Hannah. But her eyes were hollow, void of any humanity. Fear constricted my throat. I stumbled backward, my back hitting the wall. "Run!" I shouted at Jeff, who still stood there, bewildered. "Get away from her!" But as if following some unspoken command, Hannah didn't lunge at us. Instead, she let out a low, haunting laugh. "You can't escape us," she intoned, her voice blending with the shadows around her. I looked back at Jeff, desperation in my eyes. "What do we do?" I could barely keep my voice steady. Maybe if we leave the building," he suggested, glancing at Hannah, whose smile seemed to widen as if she knew something we didn't. "No." A sudden clarity hit me. "We can't just run. There's something wrong with them. They're not themselves." Just then, the lights flickered once more, plunging us into darkness. I felt Jeff's grip on my arm tighten. It was barely a second, but it felt like an eternity before the lights flickered back on. Hannah was gone, but the atmosphere felt heavier, as if she had left pieces of herself behind. "This isn't normal," I said, shaking now. "We need to stick together and find out what's happening." Just as I finished speaking, the door at the end of the hallway slammed shut with a deafening bang. Jeff jumped beside me, eyes wide. "Is this a joke? Are we being pranked?" But I could see it, the fear mirrored in his eyes. "No, Jeff, this is real. We're in danger." A sudden realization hit me like a cold wave. The others, they're not safe either. The message replayed in my mind. "They're coming for you. Don't trust them." I felt ice settle in my stomach. The urgency grew, but as I turned to lead us into the unknown, I caught a flicker of movement by the window. It was her again, Hannah, standing outside with a grin that sent chills down my spine. She pointed at us, and I knew. Whatever was happening, it was far worse than I could ever imagine. I had to know the truth. No matter the cost. We needed a plan. My mind raced while glancing back at the door, now ominously closed, as if it were guarding the secrets of this nightmare. "We can't just wait here," I said, urgency spilling from my voice. "We've got to find the others. There must be something connecting all of this." Jeff hesitated, eyes darting around. "But what if they're already—" He couldn't finish his thought. The fear in his eyes was palpable. I understood. It could be any of our coworkers, twisted and changed in some unimaginable way. "Let's check the break room," I suggested. "It's on the way to my office. We might find someone there, or at least some answers." He nodded, gripping my arm like a lifeline as we moved down the hallway, our footsteps echoing too loudly against the silence. Every flicker of the overhead lights made us both jump, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I wanted to scream for everyone to run. But what good would that do? I focused on the break room, knowing it was the first step. As we approached, the door stood ajar, swinging gently as if beckoning us inside. I pushed the door open slowly, scanning the dimly lit room. My co-workers often gathered here, but the break room felt different now. The comforting smell of coffee was replaced with a faint metallic odor that made my stomach churn. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaky. "Is anyone here?" Silence answered back. I exchanged a worried glance with Jeff. He stepped further into the room, but then something caught my eye. A note on the table, hastily scrawled in black marker. I rushed over to read it. "They are watching. Don't trust them." I felt a chill creep up my spine. Just then, I heard a sound coming from the closet in the corner. It was a soft, almost whimpering cry. Without thinking, I flung the closet door wide open. To my horror, it was Mark, the usually boisterous office manager. But his face was pale, his eyes wide with terror. "Get away!" he gasped, pressing his back against the wall. "They're not who you think they are." "Mark, what happened?" I demanded, stepping inside. I needed to know. But the moment I did, the lights flickered again. He straightened, suddenly looking less like my coworker and more like a ragged version of himself. They took the others. You can't fight back. You have to hide." "Hide? From what?" I pressed, but before he could answer, the lights died. The pitch darkness felt suffocating. I stumbled backward, grabbing Jeff's arm, panic rising. Then, from the depths of the shadows, a figure emerged, its form vaguely resembling Hannah. But something was deeply wrong. "Join us!" it hissed, the voice echoing with all the uncanny familiarity of a nightmare. "You can't escape your fate." My breath caught in my throat. How could she be here and out there at the same time? My mind churned with confusion and fear. "Run!" I shouted again, yanking Jeff with me into the hallway. The oppressive darkness swallowed us whole, the echo of Hannah's voice pursuing us like a ghost. As we burst through the doorway into the main area, I felt a surge of dread wash over me. The office was empty. Too empty. No signs of life remained, just the flicker of dying fluorescent lights above us. Jeff turned to me, eyes wide. "Where did everyone go?" I don't know, I admitted, fear gripping me tighter than before. But I have a sinking feeling we're not alone. Then, in the eerie silence, I heard it. A low, synchronized humming that seemed to pulse through the air. It wasn't coming from us. My chest tightened. "What now?" Jeff asked, his voice barely a whisper. I had no answer. But I knew one thing. We were trapped in a nightmare that was just beginning to unravel. And the deeper we went, the more questions were piling up around us. I steeled myself, ready for whatever came next. We had to find a way out, before it was too late. I took a deep breath, willing myself to stay focused. The humming grew louder, a strange melody that seemed to seep from the walls themselves. I glanced at Jeff, who looked just as overwhelmed as I felt. "We need to move," I said, trying to mask my trembling with determination. The break room was one thing, but the whole office was like a maze of fear now. "We should check the supply closet next. If anyone's hiding, that's where they might be." Jeff nodded, but his face showed reluctance. "What if we find something worse?" "Then we run," I shot back, forcing a confidence I didn't feel. We had no other choice. As we tiptoed to the supply closet, the humming halted, replaced by an eerie silence. I pulled the latch and swung the door open, revealing a clutter of office supplies and dusty boxes. At first glance, it seemed empty. "Nothing," I said, but I was met with a slight movement from the darkest corner. My heart raced again. "Did you see that?" Jeff whispered, tensing beside me. The closet was cramped, its air thick with the scent of stagnant dust. I clutched a stapler as if it were a weapon. Cautiously, I stepped further inside, squinting into the gloom. Then, there it was, a flash of movement. A figure crouched behind the shelves, trembling. "Please, don't hurt me." The voice was trembling. I recognized it as Liz's, our shy graphic designer. "Liz, it's us! We're not here to harm you," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. She peered out, her eyes wide with fright. "You don't understand. They know you're alive." "Who knows?" Jeff pressed, stepping into the closet. "What do you mean?" "They take us one by one," she whispered, glancing suspiciously over her shoulder. "If they find you with me, they'll—" Just as Liz spoke, the lights flickered overhead, and I felt a surge of dizziness. I turned to Jeff, who was also struggling to keep his balance. "What is happening?" Then I heard it again, the humming. Only this time it shifted, distorting into a dissonant wailing that sounded almost human. My skin prickled with the sound. "Get down!" I shouted, pulling Liz and Jeff further back into the closet. A shadow darted past the crack of the door, momentarily blocking the dim light. The wailing grew louder and closer, echoing through the corridor. "They're coming!" Liz gasped, crouching against the shelves. "Who?" I demanded, panic flooding my voice. "What do we do?" "They'll take you if they find you," Liz said, her voice trembling. "You have to hide." Before I could respond, the closet door creaked open fully, revealing a figure that resembled someone I once knew. It stood there, a broken smile plastered across its face. "Join us," it hissed, echoing the voice of Hannah like a twisted mockery. I could barely think. My instincts kicked in, and without a word, I pushed Liz and Jeff back into a corner, knowing we couldn't let ourselves be seen. But as I glanced back at the figure, I was met with a horror I couldn't comprehend. The eyes that stared back were not human. They were voids of darkness that shimmered with malice. Suddenly the humming crescendoed into a deafening roar, and just when I thought I was going to scream, everything dimmed around us. Then everything went dark. I woke up with a start, gasping for air in the pitch darkness. My heart thudded violently against my ribcage. I reached out, expecting to feel the coolness of the floor or the familiar outline of the supply closet, but my fingers brushed against something soft. I froze. Panic gripped me again. Was I still in the closet, or had I been transported somewhere else? Liz? Jeff? I whispered, my voice barely making a sound. No response came. I strained my ears, trying to catch the slightest noise beyond the oppressive silence. I had to get out. My instincts screamed at me to move. Shifting slowly, I pushed off the soft surface and scrambled to my feet. Bracing myself, I moved towards where I thought the door had been. The darkness seemed alive, wrapping around me, making each step feel heavier. I finally felt the edge of the door frame and pushed it open. Light spilled into the closet, blinding me momentarily. I stepped out, blinking rapidly. The office was eerily quiet, but the humming had returned, now a throbbing undertone as if it was crawling beneath my skin. I stood there, the sensation of dread washing over me like a cold wave. Jeff? Liz? I called out again, louder this time. My voice reverberated down the empty halls. I started towards my workstation, hoping they had made their way there. As I passed desks, I noticed items strewn about, papers scattered, chairs overturned. It felt as if a storm had swept through. Something was wrong, and yet the humming persisted, growing louder with each step I took. I rounded the corner to the main office area, and my breath caught in my throat. Figures moved in the distance, but each one appeared distorted, flickering like faulty video. I squinted, trying to make sense of the scene. "Over here!" a familiar voice echoed, and I turned. It was Jeff, but he looked different, pale and drawn, as if the life had been sucked out of him. There was a shadowy figure hovering beside him, whispering in his ear. "Jeff!" I shouted, rushing towards him, but the moment I moved, he turned away, as if he couldn't see me. My stomach twisted with fear. "Jeff! It's me!" Suddenly the shadow released a piercing wail that echoed through the room. I stopped dead in my tracks as the shape turned towards me. It wore a face I recognized. It was Hannah. But it was wrong, too wrong. Her eyes were voids of darkness, just like the figure in the closet. "Help him," she whispered, then pointed toward Jeff with a gnarled finger. I couldn't move. I felt paralyzed by terror. "Don't listen!" Liz's voice cut through the chaos. I turned to see her peeking from behind a desk. "You have to run." But just then, the lights flickered again. The shadow lunged at Jeff, and I felt an overwhelming rush of panic. "No!" I yelled, breaking free from the hold on my legs. I darted toward them just as the room spun around me. I reached for Jeff, but he recoiled, eyes wide with fear as if I were the monster. The room warped around us, shapes shifting as the humming intensified. Before I could grab him, the shadows swallowed us whole. Everything went dark again. This time I knew, whatever was happening, it was far from over. I couldn't breathe. The darkness pressed against me, thick and suffocating. I squeezed my eyes shut, hoping to wake up from this nightmare. But when I opened them, I was still standing in the dim office, the air heavy with an unsettling chill. I blinked and realized I was alone. The figures were gone. The shadow, Jeff, and Hannah. They were just gone. It was as if the room had swallowed them up. I took a tentative step forward, my heart racing. The humming had turned into a low growl, vibrating in my bones. I had to find Liz. She had to be somewhere. I stumbled through the office, calling her name, but the only response was the echo of my voice. The fluorescent lights above flickered, casting unsettling shadows on the walls. It felt like something was watching me, lurking just beyond the edges of my vision. That's when I noticed it. On my desk lay my phone. The screen lit up with a notification. I snatched it up, hoping to find a message from Liz or Jeff. The screen displayed a list of missed calls, mostly from Liz, but one number stood out, a callback from Hannah. I felt a knot in my stomach. Why would Hannah call? Before I could think too much, the phone buzzed in my hand. I jumped, and with trembling fingers, I answered. "Hello?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. There was silence on the line, then a low, throaty chuckle. "It's just us now," came a distorted voice that caused my heart to plummet. My skin crawled. "You should have listened." I hung up, dropping the phone like it burned. The humming returned, stronger now, wrapping around me like a shroud. I could feel it pulling me towards the darkness that seemed to seep from the corners of the room. Suddenly, the fluorescent lights went out, plunging everything back into darkness. I spun around, feeling for the wall, but I felt something brush against me. It was soft. Too soft. I recoiled as the terrified whispers of my coworkers filled the air, their voices overlapping, rising like a wave. "Help us! Why won't you save us?" I felt bile rise in my throat. "Get away!" I shouted, but my words were swallowed by their cries. I stumbled backward, desperate for any exit. I finally found a doorway and hurled myself through it. I skidded to a halt in the break room, panting. The cacophony faded to a distant murmur, but the humming remained, now throbbing in sync with my racing heart. I needed a plan. I couldn't just stand here. I needed to find Liz and get out. I scanned the break room for something. Anything that could help me. That's when I noticed the fridge. It stood slightly ajar, and the light inside flickered erratically. I approached it cautiously, opening the door wider. Inside, I found leftovers, but not the usual fare. There were jars filled with dark liquid, a grotesque mix resembling thick blood. I recoiled in horror. That's when I saw it, a reflection in the glass, a shape approaching behind me. Someone was coming. I turned to face it, my heart in my throat. It was Jeff, but he looked disheveled, wild-eyed, as if he had seen things I couldn't begin to comprehend. "We have to move!" he shouted, gripping my arm with a force that made my skin prickle. "Now!" "Where's Liz?" I demanded, my voice quivering. It felt surreal to see him like this, frantic and almost unrecognizable amid the chaos. "She's gone." His words cut through my chest like a knife. "We need to get away from here before it's too late. They're everywhere." "Who? What are you talking about?" Confusion swirled in my mind, mixing with the anxiety clawing at my gut. "I can't explain right now. Just follow me." He pulled me toward the break room door. I cast one last glance at the shadowy figures lurking just outside the flickering light. They were watching, and I could feel the weight of their gaze pressing against me. We burst into the hallway, and the din returned, the whispers, the shadows flickering like faulty lights. I felt the heat of panic rise, but Jeff moved with purpose, pulling me down the cold corridor. "We have to reach the exit before they come after us." "What about the others? We can't just leave them." "They won't listen." He turned to me, desperation in his eyes. "This place is a trap. We have to get out." With each hurried step, it felt like the walls were closing in, the shadows shifting around us as if they were alive. I could hear those damned whispers again, each one growing louder, more insistent. "Don't trust them." Before I could gather my thoughts, a figure lunged from the darkness, face contorted in agony. "Help me!" It was Hannah, or what remained of her. Her voice echoed with an unnatural pitch, twisting the air with despair. I gasped and stumbled backward while Jeff stood firm, blocking her path. "Stop! This isn't her," he warned, voice orchestrating both urgency and panic. Hannah stepped forward, her eyes empty voids, her mouth stretching into a distorted grin. "Join us," she hissed, and behind her, more figures emerged, their forms flickering in and out of existence. My heart raced as they closed in, intent on engulfing us in their despair. "Run!" Jeff screamed. We pivoted, running blindly down the hallway, the air thick with a dread that nipped at our heels. I could hear the echoes of my coworkers, my friends, calling for help, but every plea twisted into shadows, amplifying the surreal horror around us. Just when our lungs burned with the exertion, Jeff skidded to a stop in front of a door. "Here!" he shouted, yanking it open. We stumbled into the stairwell, the flickers of fluorescent lights giving us brief moments of clarity amongst the encroaching darkness. I followed Jeff as we descended quickly, each step reverberating through the silence, mingling with my heavy breathing. Thoughts raced. What was happening? Were we truly escaping, or just running deeper into the twisted nightmare? Suddenly the door behind us slammed shut with a resounding thud that echoed down the stairwell. I whipped around, fear gripping me once again. "They're following us." "Keep going," Jeff urged, his tone grave. "We can't stop now." As we reached the lower floor, I heard a cacophony of sounds reverberating through the building. It was a mix of screams and laughter, followed by the distorted sighs of twisted figures that echoed off the walls. "We're almost there!" He pushed through another door, and we finally emerged into the dimly lit parking lot. Night enveloped the building, but here, the air felt slightly fresher. A flickering bulb cast an eerie glow, but it didn't matter. We raced toward Jeff's car. "Get in!" he commanded, fumbling to unlock the doors. Just then, a realization washed over me like ice water. "What about the others? We can't just leave them. Do you think they can be saved?" His eyes widened as he scanned the building. "They're not the same anymore." But as I clambered into the passenger seat, I hesitated, torn. "I can't—" The windows erupted with shadows, faces pressed against the glass, eyes void of humanity. "Help us," they whispered, voices layered into one another, seeping into my bones. The sight was overwhelming. I was losing them, my friends, my coworkers, but I had to choose survival. "Go!" I shouted at Jeff, who was already revving the engine. He slammed the gear into drive, and with a screech of tires, we shot into the night, leaving that horror behind us. As we drove, a silence fell, heavy with unspoken words and lingering dread. I glanced back at the building, a warped silhouette against the moonlit sky. "I can't believe we made it," I said, breathless. But even as the structure faded into the distance, I couldn't shake the feeling that the shadows were still there. Watching. Waiting. The whispers lingered, echoing in my mind. Why did we survive? What happened to them? I looked over at Jeff, and his vacant stare told me he was grappling with the same questions. I opened my mouth to say something, but the uncertainty hung between us. Was it truly over? I doubted it. The road ahead felt uncertain, and while we escaped the clutches of that twisted office, I now knew there were darker things lurking just beyond the veil of night. And I couldn't shake the feeling that we hadn't escaped at all. We had merely stepped onto a different path of this endless spiral.